What's up, everybody? How you doing? This is your Coach Renz, and back home. Today we're going to talk about how this Yeshua dude is not God, and the Trinity is a fake system that was created by multiple people prior to Jesus, Christianity. Um, Give people a little bit of time to get on here, a few minutes. If you find me for the first time, please subscribe to the channel, like and share the video. Your support is very well is thanked. I appreciate it. Had a long weekend. Just got back from North Carolina. But if you find me for the first time, we are get myself together. If you find us for the first time on this channel, we break down religions, especially Christianity, since it's the one that I grew up with the most. You know what, and that's always a funny thing to me because people are like, well, you no smoke for Buddhism, no smoke for Islam. I didn't grow up with those religions. And when I did study them all, I found those to be wanting as well. So didn't need it. How you doing, James? Hola. Michelle, how you doing? Welcome to the podcast. But as you know, I don't just do these things based on field or how would I, just arbitrary thoughts or things like that. But there is research that goes into it. I look for pure facts. And by the way, I'm the owner of Smoking Phoenix Cigar Lounge here in Stone Mountain, Georgia. If you're ever in the area, let me know before you come, but let me know. I would love for you to come by. But so we're going to talk about one of a big thing that I discovered for myself. I remember we was in the Mediterranean. I was on ship with the Navy. We was on the Mediterranean. I think we had just recently left Barcelona when I read something very intriguing, right? Because as many people know, the New Testament is not, nor has it ever been, and I didn't get anything to drink with this cigar. I ain't make no coffee. I meant to make some coffee. I need this. Most people don't know. Most people know now that this book was the New Testament is primarily written in Greek, right? Which is always, I found that interesting that we've had a few scraps here and there in Aramaic, but it's written in Greek. I understand that historically the way it worked at that time frame, you had the Greeks had conquered Israel. I mean, that entire region, actually, but the Greeks had conquered that entire region. And for a long while, about a century or so, the Greeks controlled that area. So you control an area, you teach Greek. The Romans came in right behind them. And at the time frame that this Bible is written during the Roman time frame, the Roman era. Starting with Vespasian and on up through to Theodosius and many other Roman emperors over the next 300-400 years. To be able to speak and write in Greek was a sign of higher class to those people back then. Like the Romans did not like the Greeks, but speaking Greek, writing Greek was a sign of aristocracy. It was a sign of culture. It was respected because what they respected back then is antiquity. The Romans didn't have any antiquity, but the Greeks had antiquity. So they respected that. I can't say the Romans didn't have any. They didn't have much antiquity. So they respected that. So on one hand, I found it interesting that the Bible was written, the New Testament was written in Greek, but then I do understand the cultural differences and why it would be, especially since it was the Greeks who, under Ptolemy, who brought in the 70 or 72 elders to Alexandria to put together the Septuagint. Now, so here I am, and I know I was on the Mediterranean. I believe we had just left Spain. It was still warm, so that's why I'm thinking we had just left Spain because we was heading into the wintertime. But anyway, and we get to, I know we're going to Italy. We're going to Italy. We're going to be in Italy. I had plans to see some things in Italy per my research. But I come across a Greek English translation of the Bible. And I recognized that something was off. And so I had to go look at it because there are a few parts of the Bible that are the declarations of Jesus, the thing that's the end all be all. If anybody's going to say it, that is, where it's going to be said. I want to make that different. When you're talking about anything dealing with Jesus, the main thing you got to know, everybody, they're going to say over and over again, John 3:16. Got to have your John 3:16, right? But that's not the one that bothered me, that one that I started looking at the most. Because John 3:16 is just a testimony of faith, of just something you're going to believe. You can't really, it's not anything to really study. But what intrigued me the most was John 1:1. All right, now I want everybody in your Bible to turn to John 1:1. Everybody know what John 1:1 is? So John, I need y'all gotta talk to me now. Gotta talk to me. So John 1:1. Now in your our common version that we read today, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Right? He was made with God in the beginning. He was with God in the beginning, and through Him all things were made. Without Him, nothing was made. Well, the problem that I had was in that first part. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and that Word was God. Most people just accept that in its normal reading. Right? Now, back then, I was reading the authorized King James version, and it reads exactly the same. And I read, the Tinsdale version. It read exactly the same. I started reading all the different versions, and it read the same because that was going to be my thing. I played, hey, John 1:1 says it. If John 1:1 says it, then we good to go, right? That's what it is. And then I got a Greek. I got my hands on a Greek English translation, and the Greek and the English didn't match. And that's when a bigger, larger, looming problem began for me, because the Greek version doesn't translate the way that the English has translated it. Not even a little bit. The Greek version would translate as such. It would translate and say, in the beginning, and understand there are, I've forgotten what they call them scholastically. Anyway, there are certain articles that precede certain words that gives it a different tone. that gives it a different, makes it a different statement. So when you would say in how we say in the beginning, it's tone. You got tone ta ti, tone ta te, tone ta te. So masculine, feminine, and multiple people. How you conjugate it is don't ask me to explain it completely, but because I don't speak Greek like that. But what I came to recognize is that when it says in the beginning was the word, it's ton legos. And when it talks about, and the word was God, and the word was, but it's not word was God, it says the word was with God, or the word was towards the God. And it's like ton theos. And that thought that, okay, so the word, ton theos, so it's like ton legos, ton theos, the word, the God. All right, we good. And then it goes on to say it's, and then it says, and that, but then it translates, and that God, and the word was, and then it says the word was, sorry. So then it says the word was a God, and that God was towards the God. Instead of it saying, and the word was the God. Right. I have read that in the Haven says that the word is God and the word was with God was a plagiarized from the Kashu Thoth Egyptian. Now I have read that in some of the Egyptian books as well. But the thing that we're talking about here is the fact that in the Greek it follows that same pathway. And of course we know these Greeks where Ptolemy had the Septuagint written was in Egypt. So it wouldn't be absurd for them to have taken it from them. But to this day, I think Jehovah Witnesses are one of the few Christian organizations that actually translate it correctly. Like I give them the credit on that one. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, wait. So the word is not God. And if this word is not God, then the whole Trinity thing is messed up. Then the whole Jesus believing on Jesus, believing in Jesus. There's absolutely no need to believe in Jesus if Jesus is not the God. And here it is in John 1:1 where it breaks it down and lets you know he's not. But that he was considered something, of a prophet or a divine being or something of that nature prior to. But he's not the God. This is why at the Council of Nicaea, Arius had issue and was saying that there's no homoousius between the three, that Jesus and God are not the same, and was arguing against the Trinity. Have any of you guys ever looked at that translation in the Greek, where it says, where you can see the difference in that? Now, an argument was made by a gentleman once before, a long time ago, when I was having this discussion. And he was saying that, well, that article wouldn't always be there. Like you wouldn't say, if they just said Yeshua, you wouldn't translate that to a Yeshua. But I was like, no, that's an incorrect. That's trying to force your argument to be correct by changing the narrative, because when you're talking about a proper name of a person, you wouldn't have to put the article of the, or when there's no article there, it would be then a. So that didn't work. So when they try that one, that's not going to work. You have to be, it's a difference between speaking directly about a person than when you're given a title or characteristics of something. And they will try that one, you know. That's why, like at the Genesis, and then that led me like over to Genesis 1, because in Genesis 1, it actually translates to in a beginning, not in the beginning. There's no tom, ta, or te right there. This is in is there's no in the beginning in the Greek. It's just, in the Greek version is there's no, it's saying in a beginning. That's exactly what I went through when I studied the Bible in Greek and Hebrew, deconstructing the English sentences to the Greek and Hebrew are and back to English. I found an understanding of the text that was much different than the Christian dogma and teachings presented to me by the modern church. And you, as well, you should, because it doesn't match up. They had to force their own narrative in order to make it fit. If it doesn't fit, then they'll change it. They'll change the doctrine. They'll say what they want. You got to remember that for about 1,000 years or so, the average person wasn't allowed to read this book. You had to take it on faith of the priest, the pope, and the government that what you were learning was true. They took the Trinity from Plato's three levels of being, if I'm not mistaken. Well, there are many Trinitarian ideas that are preceding even Plato. Um, you had in the Kemetic, the Nubio-Kemetic Trinity of Asar, Aset, and Heru. Um, you also had you got the Hindu Trinity was already around with is Brahma, Krishna, and I forgot the mother goddess for them. But you also had in the Sumerian, you had trinities within the Sumerian, where there was Anu, Ea, and Enlil. So the idea of a trinity wasn't something that was brand new. A trinity has been around for a long time. You know, Father, it's always been the Father, the Son, and the Mother. Uh, you got Zeus, Hera, Hercules, or you can pick any of his children. Zeus, Hera, and he got plenty of kids. But you already had trinities with Zeus and Hera and some of their children. There's always been a trinity. And most cultures have some type of Trinitarian mindset. Three. Three is the magic number. Now I do find it interesting. Three is the first number in the Fibonacci spiral, but that's a whole nother thought process. 0369, damn good time. Has anybody else ever saw that in that part in John 1:1? I don't know. I'm a little bit off today, y'all. Just I don't know why. I was good to go. Slept well. I'm a little bit off. Um, I don't know. It just feels weird right now. But we're gonna power through anyway. Get my mind right. I think it might be because I ain't had any coffee this morning. But I wanted to get started. But so when Arius came to the Council of Nicaea, he brought a very good case, and a portion of his case had to do with the fact of how it was translated from the Greek, because when they read it from the Greek, they read in the beginning was, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was towards the God, and that God, and the Word was a God, and that God was towards the God, and that's how they read it. They also looked at the fact that in the New Testament, this Yeshua character, when he was claimed to be blaspheming, when he said that if you look at me, you see the Father, me and the Father are one, and most Christians will claim that that's what Jesus is claiming, that he is in unity with the Father. And what he's saying when he said that, he didn't say me and the Father are one. It actually means me and the Father are in unity. The word used there means unity. Later on, and in other parts of the Bible, when he talks to his disciples and tells the disciples that we are in unity, he's using the same word, the same verbiage in the same context. That just as me and God are in unity, you guys and we're all in unity. So is he saying that if he's saying that he's one with God there, then he has to be saying that so is all the other disciples, that they are one with God, that they're all the same. But he was just suggesting that they was all in unity in the same mindset. Many people on here whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, or TikTok. We are in unity, have a unified mindset, but that doesn't make us all one and the same. We're not one. We just are in agreement. We walk hand in hand, stride for stride. And that's all he was saying in those. And those are some of the arguments that Arius was bringing up, that, hey, even this Jesus himself was not claiming to be God or to be one with God in the sense that they are the same. But they like to take these translations and make them mean things that they don't. For instance, when it talks about the birth of this Jesus character, in Isaiah, when it talks about the birth, first they changed it. It was a past tense that there was a woman, a young woman who has conceived, and it was past tense, meaning that it was in the time frame of Isaiah. They changed it when the Christian writers were rewriting this. They changed it to say there will be a young woman. Then the Greeks took young woman and changed that to be virgin, because it just was a mistranslation. Don't know why, or if it was done on purpose. There's not enough information to say that it was done on purpose. But the Hebrew people did not take it to mean a virgin was going to birth this coming Messiah, or the present Messiah as it was in Isaiah. But it was expected to be a young woman. The whole virgin thing comes later. And most of their Christian writings is written while you have access to the Old Testament writing. So their story is forcing this Jesus character to fit into what they were trying to determine was going to be the Messiah. They wanted Jesus to fit this thing so well. So when they're writing the story of Jesus, they're drawing from this Old Testament to make this Jesus fit. And they still failed at that. This Jesus character still fails at fitting the criteria. He was supposed to bring in the kingdom of God on earth. He was supposed to have been a military leader, but he was not a military leader. So instead, as Christian dogma went, it became it was a kingdom that's in the ether. It's the spiritual kingdom is what he was talking about. The Jewish people of that day wasn't looking for a spiritual kingdom. The people who was writing the prophecies of this coming Messiah wasn't looking for a spiritual kingdom. They were looking for they was writing those prophecies are talking about a matter plane existence military commander. Hell, that's why your gospels are called gospel. If you look at what gospel actually meant back then, it means good news of military victory. It's a military term back in the day, back in those time frames, the 100s and all that. That was a military term. Good news of military victory. That's what they were looking for. Understanding those behind the scene things is what made me walk away from this religion, started me on that glorious path of walking away. So what do you guys think? Anybody on here believes the Trinity? Believes in the Trinity? Think the Trinity is actually a real thing? Even if it's not the Jesus character. Because we do have within ourselves, within this matter plane, where it is the masculine, the feminine, and then that's what else is there? You got the masculine energy, feminine energy. That's it. They can generate, but whatever it generates is not, it's part of both. So the other end of that Trinity is whatever the masculine and feminine energies generate. Some would put it as nature, but within nature is so vast, and it's kind of like a cop out. So there is really no Trinity. Right. Trinity does mean it is supposed to be God in three beings. But, and that's what they tried to make it mean. Can God ever not know that he or she is God? I'm asking you that question, Carol. Can God ever not know that it is God? Can God ever not be God? How did Christians affect this? But when I was talking about the translation into from the term virgin, I wasn't saying that Christians affected that translation. I was explaining how when that was when the 70 or 72 Jewish elders were brought into Egypt to translate the Jewish story and create the Septuagint, that at that time frame during the reign of Ptolemy, that the word for young girl Alma was mistranslated into Greek as to be virgin. 70, yeah, I knew it was 70 or 72 things. Okay, Carol, I asked Carol, like, can the creator ever not be himself, not forget himself, anything? He said no, he's stuck with it. His word can't be reversed. Right. So the all must always be the all. Can never not know it's the all, can never separate itself. So the first part of the all separating itself into three beings, that already goes against it. Then even if you were to give that and say, okay, well, it's still the all, just three different aspects of the all, but all still the all. Then when Yeshua was up on the cross and he said, why have, and it depends on which version you read actually, because he said different. We went over this like 2 weeks ago in a live. Depending upon which gospel you're reading, he says different things at the end. But when he says, why hast thou forsaken me? And when they preach this, they'll say that, well, at that time frame, Jesus had taken on sin, and since God cannot be where there is sin, then for that time frame, Jesus wasn't God because God had to leave him. So that's why he was saying, why hast thou forsaken me? That's the preacher. That's the preacher version of that. That's the doctrine version of that. But if Jesus was God, then at no time frame can he not be God. He can't, and then come back to being God. God is always God. So it doesn't work. Jesus cannot then therefore be God because then he can never not at any point in time not be God. He has to always be God. But for that, even if it was a split second, it can't be. It just because the all is already undefinable. But the all must always be the all at all times. Because if something can separate it, then that means that there is something stronger than it. Something has more influence over it. So therefore, Jesus cannot be. It would not have taken till he was 12 to know that he was God. He was going through, I'm about my father's work. He would have known about who he is and the whole thing from day one, from birth. He would have to have known that he was God. So that doesn't work. Even if that was the only time, just at the cross, if that was the only time, that one time is enough to say he's not God. The Hebrew. Oh, 70 Hebrews? Is that what you were saying? But yeah, it was 70 Hebrews. And yeah, that was for that one. Christians had nothing to do with the virgin part. That was the Greek translation over into from the Old Testament. I was just giving another example of how the Greek translation doesn't necessarily match up with what they were actually talking about. You know, the Hebrew people were looking for um, just a young lady, a young woman who has given birth. Then they changed to will give birth. Christian writers changed that. Maybe that's what you thought I was talking about. It was Christian writers later who redacted it basically, um, and made it into a future tense so that it matches up with Jesus. But when it was the original in Aramaic in Isaiah, it uses past tense to mean that there was all, and saying that a young lady has already conceived who will bring forth this Messiah. So maybe I'm thinking that's what you meant when I said Christians. Had something to do with the whole virgin thing. It was in that regard that Christians had something to do with it. The mistranslation into virgin, that was just the Greeks, the Ptolemies, um, mistake on that part. Men wonder why he didn't save himself, but depend on something else to be saved. Why he didn't save himself, but depend on something else, something else to be saved. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things. In some of the versions, I think two of the versions says like, well, he claimed to see, is he Elijah, something like that. Um, let's see if he saved himself, or Elijah will come and save him, and so on and so forth. But he couldn't save himself because he was just a dude. Um, well, it's just a made-up story. First of all, it's not even a real story. Do you know that that for during that era of time, the Romans recorded every crucifixion. They recorded all the crucifixions. And out of all the crucifixions, you know whose crucifixion is not recorded in the Roman annals? There is no record of Yahshua or Yeshua ben Joseph or Yeshua uh, ben Bethlehem or Nazareth. There's no Yeshua during that time frame that was crucified. And yet they got the crucifixion for all these other people during those years, during that time frame. Yeah, whether you're looking at 32 AD, not 80, 32 CE, because I don't use no 80. 32 CE to 33 CE to 34 CE. There's no Yeshua. That was another thing that I went and I was researching and I looked for, because I was like, okay, if there was a Jesus, and since the Romans recorded all the crucifixions, like you can go, when you go research this, you can find like crucifixions for every month, every day, every week, every month, who was crucified in Judea, in Jerusalem. You narrow it all the way down, Judea, Jerusalem, and you look at it, and you have to go and look at 32. Really, you should look at 32. I look at 32, 33, and 34, those years, right? During those years, absolutely zero Yeshua's crucified, or Yahshua's zero, zero, right? Even though there were Yeshuas running around, there were Yeshuas who was causing different issues and who was going against the Romans. Josephus talked about 4 different Yeshuas. But the Romans record none of them being crucified and dying. But during those years, they record other people. It would be one thing if I looked at year 32, 33, 34, and there are gaps missing, or you don't have those records. But when they got the records, and yet there's no page torn out, and none of that kind of stuff, it's like, okay, where's his record? And I thought, and what made me think about that back in the day was, if I was Christian and I wanted to prove historically that this is correct, what would be some of the evidence that I would need? So since if I want to prove that my grandfather passed away on February 5th of 1980, 86, no, 87, 87 or 88. I can go get a death certificate, right? Because our courts, in our court system, our judicial system, they have death certificates. I don't know if it's a judicial, but in our governmental system, you get a death certificate, just like you get a birth certificate. Well, they didn't have death certificates, but they recorded the birth. You know, you have this is the year of this. This is this year, and you record it. No recordings of a Yeshua being crucified to death in that area. But I thought I was gonna find it. That I'm telling y'all, I was on mission to find it. And when I finally got an opportunity to look at it, to look at those records, got other people listed, but no Jesus, no Yeshuas, no Yahshuas. And I found that to be problematic. It's not like, and you can go conspiracy where they didn't want to record, they didn't want to record him because then that'd be proof, and they were trying to shut it down. The Romans, they didn't try to shut that story down. Shit, they created it anyway, but definitely wasn't trying to shut it down. They were just trying to control the people. And when I say they were trying to control the people, meaning that the Romans didn't care about what religion you worship, but the messianic Jewish people were acting crazy, and then this creation of Christianity, the people still was acting crazy. So they were a disruption in the Roman Empire, and so that's why some Roman emperors didn't care for them too much. You can't have fighting in the streets, and Christians were fighting one another in the streets. At least the Jewish people were saying, we are fighting against the Romans. The Christians were, we fighting against each other. And if you think about that, I'm just going off the top of the dome now. I do have a meeting that's supposed to happen soon after 12. We'll see whenever he pulls up. But is it not still true to this day that the majority of people that Christians fight are their own Christian selves? From the very beginning of Christianity, Christianity has been a self-inflicting wound. Because the biggest problem in Christianity up until Theodosius was Christians fighting each other. And then up until Theodosius, Christians fighting each other. It wasn't until Theodosius came in like, all right, fine, I'm gonna kill everybody who's not going with the orthodoxy. You think they're still in it today? I don't know what you mean by that one. All 70 Jew Hebrew translators use the word for virgin. Virgin in the Greek that translated it. Greeks have multiple words for some words that Hebrew and English have. We use love, for example, but Greeks have multiple years. Yeshua would probably have been crucified probably in 29 to 30. So it would not have been around 32, 34. I understand what you're saying. Okay. So first let me answer the last one, then I go forward. I was saying if you was looking at it, if a person was looking at it, didn't have much time, I would tell them to go look at those years. Because when you look at the calendar mistakenly starts out with they omit the year 0. So we're 1 year off. Right? But no, when you look at it, you can see how the years would actually match up they're not a regular calendar like our calendar. They were using the Julian calendar at the time. So at the time frame of the so-called time frame of this crucifixion was using the Julian calendar. So looking at the annuals based on the Julian calendar, then this is why I say, and since he was supposed to have died at 33 years old, then it would be 32, the Julian calendar year that matches the year 32. But I went ahead and looked, but I actually looked at 10 years, a 10-year volume, 5 years ahead, 5 years back, just in case, just to make sure. But it should have been in 32. The Julian calendar year that matches with 32 is where it should have been if it had happened at all. But it didn't happen. But those years of those crucifixions in Judea. True. Greek words do have multiple. You can have like the Greek, just like the Inuits have 5 different variations for snow, and the Greeks have 5 different variations for the word for love. Fact still remains that the Hebrew word for young girl does not mean virgin. The Greeks just translated that virgin. They have a word for a young girl who is not a virgin, but they chose not to use it. So my point is the whole virgin birth thing was a more of a man-made creation. The virgin birth was a creation of those people at that time frame. They purposely or accidentally, can't say which one, but they chose not to use the Greek words for young woman. But if you're going to go by the more original writing of it, it meant young woman. It does not mean virgin. In no context does Alma mean virgin. It just means young woman. Matter of fact, in other parts of the Bible, of the Old Testament rather, when they speak of a young woman who wasn't a virgin, they use the same word, Alma. You know, it's like a fish story. Got to make it bigger and bigger. That's all it is to me. It's a fish story. I know it means young woman. She possibly, but we're going to make his birth more miraculous because Hercules had a miraculous birth. Hero had a miraculous birth. The Buddha had a miraculous birth. Dionysus had a miraculous birth. So Jesus got to have a miraculous birth. Right. It was always young girl. But when you're competing religions, your religion has to stand out. You can't have everybody else having miraculous births, and then your new Messiah, your new God doesn't have a miraculous birth. That's not going to work. I mean, that's just bad marketing. If you think about it, I know I'm saying it like in today's time frame, in today's mindset, but that's bad marketing. If I'm creating a new religion, and let's say I'm trying to convince y'all to come to this new religion, I have to have something that stands out from the rest of them. And when we're talking about a Messiah coming, my Messiah gotta be special. You know, you gotta have on the day of his conception was a comet, or a day of his birth. The Halley's Comet came in on the 75th, whatever, or the 33rd parallel or angle, degrees. There was a solar eclipse on the moment of his birth. There has to be something special. You just can't be born from a young girl who may have already had a few children. So special. He had to be special. Just like, how many people did he feed? Did he feed 2,000? Did he feed 6,000? How many people did he feed? The story keeps changing. The story got bigger. All the miracles and more miracles occurred the further you read into the Gospels, because by the time John is writing, he has to write an even bigger version of this Jesus character. Right? John's writing, Luke had, let's say, I don't know the exact number, so I'm not quoting the exact number, but if Matthew had 5 miracles, well, Mark had 5 miracles, then Matthew, which is written after, and Matthew, all right, I got 8 miracles. Then Luke writing, and Luke is like, nah, I got 11. And then John writing, John like, nah, I got 17. And that's pretty much how it goes. The later the book written, the more miracles he supposedly had. That got big fish story written all over it. It's kind of like I did a video 4, 5, 6 years ago where it was liar, lunatic, or legend. And Lord, liar, lunatic, or legend. And this story is legendized. The Romans convinced with sword and fear, the Jewish people use the Romans and vice versa. I think the Romans and Jewish folks are still in it today, and I'm connecting both your statements. The Romans convinced with sword and fear, yeah. The Jewish people use the Romans and vice versa. Yeah. Now I do agree they both use each other, and they do convince with sword and a spear. You can't show where any large group of people were converted over to any religion, converted over into Christianity, into the Abrahamic religion, and there wasn't violence, or in more modern times, economic violence. But there's always some form of violence. I'm missing your point. There are young women. How did that move? There are young women, and then there are the Greek word that distinguishes the young word for women. It is not the Greeks that translated it. It was the Hebrew scribes that translated the word into the Greek. Those Hebrew scholars chose that word virgin, all 70 of them, and in using this word, they were using the Greek word that specifically identifies what kind of young woman it was. The woman was young, but specifically a virgin. No, I understood what you meant. I understood that completely. But I appreciate you, expressing it out in more detail. No, I understood what you're saying. And like I said in the very beginning, it was the 70 Hebrew. That's why I brought up the 70 so-called Hebrew elders who came in to do this translation. Understand that completely. And I understand that they chose the Greek word that meant virgin. But the Aramaic word does not mean virgin, which means that those those Hebrews specifically and purposely changed it to mean virgin. When the previous generations from 500 BCE, they never wrote it to mean virgin. But you get about 400 years later, not 400, then a little bit shorter than that, about 300 years later, these guys changes it to virgin. And they were of those people who was writing and believing this book. We're not in disagreement on this at all, Charles. I agree with you. It was the Hebrew scribes, elders who translated it incorrectly. I think they translated it incorrectly on purpose. But whether they did or didn't, it was still a mistranslation. It was not the intent of Isaiah that when that was written for it to mean a virgin. But they decided for themselves that that's what it's going to mean. And you got to understand the kind of pressure and then what was going on at the time. Here you have Ptolemy had this thing about him where he craved knowledge. We like to talk about the Library of Alexandria. Well, one of the primary reasons why you had, and I think still have, the Library of Alexandria is because when you came into the Ptolemaic Egypt, they required that any book that you had to be turned over to the state. A copy of it is made, book, scroll, a copy of it is made, and then it goes into the library, and then you can have your scroll back. So they would have had copies of scrolls from the Vedics, so of course they wanted the Talmud or the Old Testament to be translated into Greeks. They were gathering information from all over their known world, the world that they knew. So it's not surprising they would say, hey, we need a Greek translation of this Jewish religion. It's not that they was believing in this religion. They just wanted a copy of it, which is a very smart thing. We have kind of like we have the Library of Congress today. If you write a book, And if you want to get it sold, or if you write a book and you want to protect it, put it that way, you want to protect it, then you get the book copywritten. Well, once your book is copywritten, it goes into the Library of Congress. So they're keeping a record of all the every piece of knowledge that goes out. It's a good idea. I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's a good idea to be able to do that. And the better thing is that now these things can be everything is. If you didn't know, the Library of Congress has been working for decades digitizing everything. But the fact remains, they didn't have to use that word. They didn't have to use the word virgin. They could have used the Greek word for young woman. So, and that's what we have to realize. And this is why I cannot trust, nor will I ever trust just what somebody tells me or what the government is saying or some church or some pastor or whatever. Because as much as we have our own intentions for why we do and why we say, and especially people of power, or why they do and why they say, those people had the same mentality as well. I don't understand how sometimes we get this, you know, idea that there was this group of people in the past and they were just so sweet and nice and just no, they were just as jacked up. Their government system just as jacked up as ours is today. Their academic system has just as many egotistical, jacked up people as we do today. Their military just as jacked up, and everybody has their agenda. Everybody has their nationalism or tribalism or whatever it is. So it doesn't. Those people weren't like all these saintly people who was doing this. You think they used the word virgin to snare men, to snare man. Um, Grand Rising over there on YouTube. To snare a man? No, I think they use the word virgin in this description to make, you know, to make it so that this Messiah is more special because they're comparing it. When they're translating this over into the Greek, they would have to have known all the Greek stories to make it comparable to the Greek story. So whenever this Messiah comes, they want this Messiah to be special, like the uh, Greek gods, because they were under Greek rule at the time frame. So they would have known the Greek stories of Hercules and Dionysus and Achilles and all these other demigods. So whenever their Messiah comes out, they want to make sure that their story fits into that higher level of, specialness. Grand Rising, Michael, how you doing? We still got a schedule, Michael. I have not forgotten about you. Still have a schedule. Did you hit me up on? Did you send me I know you sent me a instant message, a DM thing, whatever it's called. I've been off my game for the but I got you. But we and you set things up like that. You gotta make it great. You gotta give your people something greater to stand on, a higher leg to make you stand out. So since the Greeks had all these special births, they had to have a special birth. And the virgin is one of those things that changes it. Grand Rising Clinton. But what happened? Men began their journey to bag a virgin. Oh, this was long before the step to it as far as bagging a virgin. And it wasn't bagging a virgin. It wasn't so much about bagging a virgin as if being with a virgin was so much better. Yeah, I think I'm being. Let's okay. Carol, I don't know if you're a man or a woman because I know men and women with that name. But I think most men will agree with me. As far as sexual pleasure, I don't want no virgins. No. This is why Tamar, dressed up as a prostitute, was able to get impregnated by her father-in-law. Uh, this is why Ruth, over there in the wheelhouse, took that old man around the world, took Boaz around the world, and Boaz was like, God damn, I gotta make a deal with this moon right now. When it comes to just pleasure, well, we don't want no virgins. The thing about a virgin is that you are ensuring it's about bloodlines, um, and it's a thing about ego. They were making sure that women were virgins long before the Romans and the Greeks came around, because, and this is not just those people, this is people of all different groups. They were the virgin. She was untouched. You know her bloodline. Your ping ping, first one in there. So only if a child comes out should be yours. This is why only women were, ostracized or punished for adultery. Men were not punished for adultery, just women. This is why in Leviticus, if a woman is assaulted and she's not betrothed, then he pays 50 pieces of silver, and now she has to marry her assailant. If a woman is betrothed or married and she's assaulted, then it's a stupid ass rule. If she screams, if they're in the city and she screams, then she is not to be stoned. If they're in the city and she doesn't scream, then she and the assailant is to be stoned. If they're outside the city, because then her scream doesn't matter, then only the assailant is stoned. So this is why they have dumbass rules like that. But that's about the bloodline, because if she's sexually assaulted by and she's married, then if she gets pregnant, that child doesn't belong to that man, and that man can have, a bastard son in gaining his inheritance, any portions of the inheritance. This is why Sarah, once she had Isaac, was like, Hagar and Ishmael gotta go, because he can't have none of the inheritance. So a virgin was more about money and ego, not so much about purity, and I mean, not so much about their purity, but and not so much, and it definitely wasn't about pleasure. Because they were getting temple prostitutes all over the place. I forgot how one scholar explained the use of virgin. Oh yeah, I mean, Alma just means young woman. When you look at it in Isaiah and the Aramaic, it just means young woman. The Greek scholar, the Hebrew scholars for the Greeks translated it to mean virgin. And you got to recognize that when these 70 scribes came in, you're talking about a time frame where they had already been under Greek rule for a while. So these could have been scribes who grew up Hellenized. So they're favorable to the Greeks. Just like Herod was a Hellenistic Hebrew who was ruling over Judea for the Romans. Just like Philo of Alexander at the time of Vespasian, he was a Hellenistic Jew. So he was more favored, and he was a tax collector, and he was like one of the wealthiest little dudes in the Roman Empire at the time frame too. So he was all about them Romans. He was like, "Hey, Vespasian, we boys." I mean, hell, before Vespasian went to become emperor, he went to Egypt and hung out with Philo for a while, performed some miracles. Vespasian performed some miracles before he went and took the throne. So there's political maneuvering going on in all of this. Dr. Henry Clark spoke and said that virgin means young woman. Right. Yeah. The word alma just means young woman. Now, the word that they use in the Septuagint does mean virgin. It's just a bad translation. That's all. Just a bad translation. And of course, like this, Jesus didn't die on a cross because there's absolutely zero records of him dying on a cross. And it's so foul. If you go to Israel, when you go to Israel, of course they built a church on top of everything, so you can't even tell what Calvary looks like. It's just a hill, church on the hill, but there's so many buildings around it, you still really can't even tell. And the funny thing about it, you go inside and then you go walk up these little steps, and you're supposed to be at this spot, and they got 3 holes, and they're like, oh yeah, one of these, the one in the middle, that one symbolizes Jesus' hole, and we believe this is the hole that Jesus in. And then you go down the stairs. You go down the stairs along the wall, and take a right into this room over here, and then they have, this is the tomb. I'm like, where they crucify you and where the tomb is like 30, 40 feet, well, about 20 yards away. Like, come on, man. You ain't gonna get, there were no tombs that was right there on Calvary like that. This is bullshit. And they got a tomb, and people going in there praying and stuff. You know, I ain't gonna lie, the first time I went, I was still fighting the fight. So I went in there and I'm like, oh, this is the slab that they laid Jesus on. You know, and I saw the hole and I was like, oh, I'm here. Went to Bethlehem and went to the manger area, and I was like, oh, this is the bottom of their house. And this is the manger. There's a picture of me down there all kneeling before it, because they let you kneel before there. You get like a minute. You don't even get a minute. You get like 45 seconds. And had my cross colors jacket on. I remember that. Had my cross colors jacket on with some white jeans and some black shoes. Yeah, I did all the shits. Did all of it. All of it. Went to the Wailing Wall, put my little piece of paper in there. I can tell you right now, I remember what I know what I put in the Wailing Wall the first time. That piece of paper. It didn't work. It didn't work at all. So, you know, and like that's one of those things. Like, okay, this is the Wailing Wall, y'all. You go to the Wailing Wall. That means that your prayers that you write on this piece of paper is imbued by an angel that once sat on this wall. Power of the Wailing Wall. So I wrote it down. I held it tight in my hand. I meditated on that thing for a while. Went up to the wall, and you dig it, you put it into like a little crevice of it, and you pray over that piece of paper. Power. You got all these other people praying. You got this other aesthetic view, and they reading stuff and all that. The women are separated on one side and men on another side, so you can't do it together. Yep, put that piece of paper in there. That prayer, that prayer didn't work. I'm sure a Christian person would say that I didn't believe, I didn't have the Holy Spirit or faith or whatever. But at that time frame when I was in Israel, that's when I was begging, pleading for this God to lead me to Him. Like, you know, I was mad they wouldn't let us do baptism in the Jordan River at the time because it was so nasty. But I was like, that was a time frame where I was begging for this. This gotta be right. Like, I got demons in me or something. Let me get this reprobate mind. All this studying and stuff. Yep. And then we went to Italy, and there was a second time going back to Italy, and it was like, oh, I get to go into the Vatican library and go see the Ark of Constantine's art, and this shit is not matching up. takes time to get your message to God when you're at the wall. Well, let me put it like this, then, Carol. When I was at the wall, I was what? When I was at the Wailing Walls, I was about 20 years old. All right. Yeah, I was about 20 years old. And that prayer, the results of that prayer not working, coming to the point where that prayer didn't work, would have been about 15, 16 years later. So if it takes more than 15, 16 years for your prayer to get to this God, a whole bunch of people is in a world of hurt, right? Maybe that's why most people pray the answer is no. They like, look, I need this to happen in the next 6 months. And well, it's going, we're now serving number 1 billion. But sorry, you're 15 billion, 1700 million. You way back there. You ain't being served. But it's all about belief though. And I was trying to have, I was at that time frame, I was trying my damnedest. I was at the wall. I ain't gonna lie to y'all, I was at the wall crying. I was crying at the wall back then. 20 years old, Wailing Wall, big old Marine. I've seen some combat already, but I'm at the Wailing Wall crying. And I wasn't even praying for something that was problematic. It wasn't even problematic in my life at the time frame. Everything was good. I just want things to stay good. But anyway, although I was having some, that was when I was having some, because I was already questioning the Bible, but my thought process was they're just teaching it wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like right before the Wailing Wall is when I went through the eye of a needle, and I had just saw a camel like 3 weeks ago. So I'm looking at this big ass doorway that's the eye of a needle, that's part of the old wall. So it's not a new eye of a needle. I'm like, this would have been an eye of a needle during the time of Jeebus. And I was like, wait a minute. A camel can walk through this? Some bullshit. My tour group left me because I'm stuck right here. And then this guy named David Aseed, he identified me as like, you just figured out where eye of a needle is. Then we started pen piling. But so I was like, okay, yeah. See, preachers just don't preach it right. They just don't understand. They just don't know. A rich person can go to heaven. You just have to be willing to unload all your stuff off your camel and get off your camel. And then you can enter the gate. You can't be in love with your material things. Basically, is the message. But in the 1970s, that is not what they was teaching. So I was just like, they just don't know what they're teaching. I can still be Christian. I'm gonna teach them the right way. So leaving there, my next stop was the Wailing Wall. So it wasn't like I was, oh, this Christianity bullshit. No, I forgot what was the term we used to use back in the day. I forgot, it was something for Jesus. But I was a soldier in the army, for real. But I wasn't going for that. Bless your heart for trying. You know what I mean when somebody said, bless your heart. Oh, I put that on the wrong statement. I wanted that to be on this one. I want that to be right there. That's what I want. I want the heart thing to be on your bless your heart. But no, I did. I was sold out. That's what it. I was back then. I was trying to be intellectually, because I realized that some of these jokers here in Mayweather was teaching some bullshit versions of Christianity. I need to teach them the right version of Christianity, so that we can get into heaven when the rapture comes and be raptured up. Back then, the teachings were that we were the Gentiles. Well, I can't, we might diverge here. According to the Hebrew people, I am a Gentile because my ancestry doesn't come from nowhere near in that region. Make sure I ain't missing nobody else. Now, oh my gosh, that just hit me in the back. Still has some smoke in my mouth when I said now, so it hit the back of my throat. Anyway, yeah. I know normally we wait till 12 o'clock before we can just talk about anything, but we can just go ahead and talk about whatever you guys want to talk about for the rest of the time frame. I don't know when the person I'm supposed to meet, they're supposed to be here soon after opening, which opening is at 12 noon. So if there was any other questions or comments or other subject matters you guys had questions about or want to talk about, just let me know. Go ahead and post it in there. Write it in the commentary. And we can discuss those things up until that joker or somebody else shows up. But we definitely have to deconstruct ourselves from not just this religion, but shit, any religion, any and all religions. To hold on to any of these ancient books and try to make them fit. There are very few to make them fit to today is not going to work. There are very few books, ancient, somewhat religious books that will fit. None of the hardcore religious books will still fit today. Whether it's any of the Abrahamics, none of the Abrahamic books fit today. None of the Hebrew books don't fit. The Christian books don't fit. The Muslim book don't fit. It doesn't fit today. No matter how hard people try. And the further and the more and more we go into time, it doesn't fit. A gentleman was telling me, and I got to do a shorter video about it, a separate video for it. Name another book that has prophecies, because the Bible has all these prophecies coming true. Hell, I can just go with Nostradamus. 70% of Nostradamus' prophecies have come true. So does that mean we should be worshiping Nostradamus? No. The Tao and the Hermetics are the only books that are two of the few that are still applicable today. And the Hermetics will always be applicable because it just talks about natural law, Hermetic law. It doesn't really it's not about how to worship anything or all that kind of stuff. And the Tao is very similar to that. And it's a very good book for just leadership and how to be a good person. Have you looked up Rashad Jamal yet? If not, bro, please do. But keep up the great work. Thank you, Gucci. Rashad Jamal. So he's a musician. Okay. Got a little. All right. I'll play some of that today of Rashad Jamal. Speaking of music, man, what was my man name? I used to listen to it when I first heard of him about like 8, 9 years ago. I was listening to bro man damn near every day on my YouTube. I just purchased a book, The Chronological Bible Study. It says thick. I wonder how accurate that would be. You know, since most of the stories that were written in the Old Testament weren't written until in the 500s, during and after the Babylonian captivity. What was that dude name? Shit. I can see the video, I can see the person, but I cannot for the life of me think of what his goddamn own name was. He did his videos were called Ill Mind. But there was a primary one. The the song that he did when he was out on the salt flats in the video. No, he said where he was set back by the ancestors to awaken the message. Just check out what he says. I don't understand the no part, but so it's not the musician guy that's Jamal. I see a Rashad Jamal, a musician. Did I type the wrong name in? That's not the guy I'm looking for. I'm thinking of Dak. Rod Dak. The guy I'm talking about, it's not Rod Dak. But what is that dude name who did Ill Mind? Ill Mind, Ill Mind, Ill Mind, Ill Mind, Ill Mind. Hobson. Yeah, I used to listen to Hobson a lot when he first that he has this that Hobson has this one song. Whew, that shit was cold. It but his song Ill Mind, and then he did go kind of like make like 5 versions of the song. But the one where the video is he's all like on the salt flats, Ill Mind of Hobson 7. I would play here, but I probably get demonetized for playing it. Raymond Ibinga. Who is Raymond Ibinga? Grand Rising Debbie, how you doing? He's a magician, but he's so much more. Okay, I'll check him out. In another video, you talked about other cultures that the Hebrew probably copied the Exodus story from. What evidence is there for that story other than it is written down, and where did they supposedly cross the sea? So what I talked about, most likely for the most part, these stories, one, are written on the walls in Egypt. All right. So you have look at two different people groups that I'm talking about. And then the thing about it, each one of these people groups are also backed up by pottery, evidence of construction of buildings that they lived there. So there's evidence of their villages, that sort of thing, not just the story, right? Because if it was just written on the walls of Egypt, okay, that's the same thing as literature. The only great part about what's written on the walls of Egypt is that they're unchanged, unlike literature can be changed when it's written down. So the first group, because the other one takes a little bit longer to break down. So the first group is the Hyksos. It is archaeologically known that the Hyksos came into Egypt, fought against them, controlled for a little while, but then you had a Egyptian leader who left, and some people are trying to say that Akhenaten is this guy, but I think those scholars are so awful and wrong about that one. That Akhenaten changed his name to Moses and came up into join the Hyksos, and he was leading a group of lepers, and then took those lepers across the Nile Delta, which this part is more accurate of the Sea of Reeds, because it is actually a mistranslation again in the Old Testament of the Red Sea. It's actually should have been translated as the Sea of Reeds, which is an area up in the Nile Delta, which can be crossed. And oddly enough, in this area, at certain times of the year, when a wind that comes off of the Mediterranean, it blows all, like in a matter of an hour or so, it blows all the water off. Now the water is only like 6 feet deep anyway, but it blows this water all off, and then you can go across this sea of reeds. And reeds are, the plant, a reed plant, because it's all in this marshland area. And when it blows it off for like a day or two, it's dry. Well, it ain't dry, but you know what I'm saying. It's not 6 feet of water anymore. And then the wind stops and the water rushes back in. So that's a known natural occurring phenomenon up in the Nile Delta at the Sea of Reeds. And the Hyksos were up there. And when they finally were defeated by Tutankhamun, I believe, they left into the Sinai Peninsula. And the guy who was leading a bunch of lepers' name was Moses. So but the story kind of ends right there, that they crossed over. Now the other comedic story is the fact that you have the worshippers of the Akhten under Akhenaten who believed in the one God. Akhenaten was most likely killed, and Tutankhamun came into rule. Well, one of Akhenaten's chief priests, so to speak, was a dude named Ramoses. Ramoses, thinking, I'm going to be here in Egypt when I die, had already built for himself a tomb. But when he left, when Akhenaten was disposed of, you then had Ramos take the remaining worshippers of the Akhten. They fought a battle against Tutankhamun's navy on the Red Sea. Now, Tutankhamun forces finished the inscription on Ramoses' tomb and said that Tutankhamun forces won. We don't actually know who won, but he says Tutankhamun forces won. And the Ramoses and his people went ahead and went across the Red Sea to the Sinai Peninsula. And from the Sinai Peninsula, they migrated up into the Levant, and they were living as nomadic people in the hillside, still worshiping the Akhten. Now, this Levant area was still controlled by Egypt. They were a vassal state of Egypt. But then as the Bronze Age collapse happens, some hundreds of years later, the rest of the Canaanite people who were living, the Philistines, the Phoenicians, and all them who were living more coastal, moved into the hillside and began to merge with the people of the Akhten. But by this time, these people of the Akhten had, so we're talking hundreds of years later, their worship of the Akhten wasn't the same anymore. They had included the Canaanite deity of Yahweh, his wife Asherah, so they had became infused with the Canaanite people. Now, you have temples, when you have temples and homesteads and things of that nature that show that these people lived there. So it's not just what somebody wrote down. That's some of the evidence that demonstrates it. And those are the things that you have to have in order to demonstrate these kinds of things. Like somebody last week was like, you can't prove Nero or Julius Caesar. I'm like, dude, you got coins that show when Julius Caesar came into office and he was young, and then some more coins of him being a little bit older. Well, not into office. When I say into office, as a general. And then you got coins show he was older when he was an emperor. So you got something that says, okay, these, it's like we got George Washington on a coin, you got Lincoln on a coin, you got, Hamilton on a bill. So we have like these things that demonstrate. And Nero, you got young Nero on coins, middle-aged Nero on coin, old-ass Nero on coins. So it's like these are archaeological evidence that suggests that this person most likely existed during the time frame that we said that it says that he's supposed to exist, because we have harder evidence of that. That'd be hell of a hoax to say that, hey, you know what? We're gonna put a made-up person on our money. I don't think that there's been a culture that put a person on their money and that person didn't exist. Because usually it's that person who was deciding the face on the minted coins at that time frame. If I'm Nero, I'm not putting somebody else on a coin. I'm putting my face on the damn coin. I'm doing nobody else. I'm the emperor. And military generals did that. Even to this day, our modern military has gotten back into doing that, like creating coins for themselves. So, and that comes from when the Roman generals would create coins for themselves because they had to pay their military. And of course, these coins are made out of precious metal, so the value wasn't in the face; the value is in the precious metal that the coin is minted in. But those are two of the places that this story could have come from. And then, of course, prior to the Ramos' story and the Hicksock story, you have Yusuf. I'm messing up this man's name. So it's Joseph. Yusuf was a guy. Oh, appreciate that, Errol. Yusuf was a guy who was a Semitic guy, and Semitic just means they spoke a common language from that Levant area. Semitic guy who came in, became an important person in the Kemetic Egyptian rulership, and then had a bunch of his people came in when there was a famine. Told the emperor that, hey, but he told him until you rebuild this Kemetic temple, that's when, then the famine would end. I forgot it was a female deity that he had to rebuild a temple for. Coach Renz. All right, Errol. I appreciate that, Errol. Thanks, man. I went to church yesterday the wife and I went to church yesterday to watch her nephew preach. Watching the praise and worship service with new eyes was entertaining and funny. I did give to the collection plate, but if feeling better giving to you, but you feel better giving to mine. So as I messed up and read that all crooked, Errol, who just donated to the collection plate on YouTube, and I greatly appreciate it. And everybody continue to share the videos and comment. He went to church to watch the nephew preach. I will say it is an entertaining thing to go to a church with this perspective and watch what they do. It can be hilarious at times. And then it also can be, I don't know about you, but it also can be sad to see some of the hysterics because you're watching it a lot differently now. You can, if you go to a church long enough, you can time when you know this certain person gonna get up and start hooping. This person gonna get up and start dancing. This person, that's the runner over there. And they all know it. Yes, they have. My father had won a coin. Michael, I know you meant to say something, but I don't know if you're doing talking text, but that just went crazy. Yes, they have. My father had won a. Yes, Moses crossed the Red Sea, but he crossed the Red Sea by boat because he fought Tutankhamun on the sea. But that translation of the Red Sea is actually a mistranslation. It actually should be read as the Sea of Reeds, REE, like the plant reed, which is more feasible. It is quite comical to see the prayer and dance. Let me tell you another thing about crossing the Red Sea. All right. So the shortest point of the Red Sea, and it would take more than Moses supposedly did all of this in around 1300 BCE up to today. So you're only looking at about um, 3,500 years. The Red Sea is not parted so greatly, more having spread itself out more so over 3,500 years. It will be relatively the same, similar as it is today. The shortest distance between Egypt and the Red Sea is 31 miles. I'm quite sure it's 31 miles. Let me check to make sure. Oh, okay. Today he had a corner military officer. Mm-hmm. That's a big thing now, is collecting coins. All right. So the 21 miles. Okay. I stand corrected. The shortest distance between that you could cross the Red Sea is 21 miles. 21 miles. Now, according to hold on for a second. Your chairs? I wasn't here this week.
William signed for it.
William?
Williams. I don't know where they.
Uh,
But I was curious because last day I was here
when was that?
today.
Oh, today?
Nah,
I've been here since like 10, and nobody showed up.
Okay, well let me.
But that was today. I saw UPS. Was it UPS?
Amazon.
I haven't seen Amazon truck. I can see out this window. I ain't seen no truck. No problem. Yeah, and y'all come up here. Y'all can go next door and get your nails did. I got bit by something, and it bit me like right in the high thigh. Oh, it hurt like hell to get up and walk. But anyway, 21 miles, y'all. Now, according to that story, about 2 million people, even if you just look at the 600 young able-bodied men, 600,000 young able-bodied men, supposedly crossed 21 miles in one night. 21 miles in one night. Come on, people. Now, the way the story is written, they had cattle, they got goods and things that they had. Remember, it says that they had to ask, he would tell them to ask the Egyptians for stuff, for gold and all this kind of stuff, and they're going to be, and this God was going to change their free will and make them give them gifts and all this stuff. Now, of course, there were old men, there were babies, there was women, old women, young women, babies. They crossed 21 miles in one night with carriages and just, let's be real, y'all. How do y'all, that's impossible. Not happening. That's not. You is an enemy of God. You only come online to bash God. Actually, you don't watch enough of my videos because I don't. Because like some days ain't got nothing to do with your God. Especially like Thursday, ain't got nothing to do with your God. We talk about hermetic things as well. So First of all, I don't come online just to bash your guy. I just come online, and I'm not bashing. I'm just telling what it is. And deceive God's people. Nope, you're not my audience. See, I never invite Christians to come on here. I'm not trying to change anybody. All right. So you can take that part out. I ain't even read your whole statement. I'm just breaking it down as I go. And deceive God people. Find a different topic. You're not proving no points. You can't change us believers' mind. Antichrist spirit is operating in you. That's why you're rejecting Jesus. I have a question for you, Gilroy. With all due respect, young man, why are you here? You're not the audience. My audience is people who've already decided for themselves. And then I'm not proving anything. Show me how people can cross 21 miles at night. Those people cross 21 miles at night. Come on, dude. Well, they always talking before they know anything that's going on. Is that Papa's you went to a funeral service 2 weeks ago to see the pastor speak. Feels real different and sad. In the mud too. Yeah. It does. It feels different, and I feel bad for the. It's like, wow. Especially when I hear them saying things, and I'm like, that's not right. That's not what that means. It's just like my man Gilroy, or Glenroy. Sorry, my apologies. I thought I said Gilroy. It's Glenroy. So as we were saying, how can we did so when I was in Germany, we did the Volksmarch. The Volksmarch is commemorating Patton moving a armored, that I think it's the 3rd Army Battalion, whatever, 100 miles in 4 days. So you go 100 miles in 4 days, 25 miles a day. This was young military guys with mechanized vehicles moving 25 miles a day. And they got to move, they're moving pretty much day and night, 25 miles a day. But they got vehicles. Yeah, a lot of guys have to walk and they got their gear on. These are all able-bodied. If they have some 60, 70, 80-year-old and no vehicles, this is not accomplished. They won't be able to do this. And this is in more modern times. We talking oxens and wheelbarrows and carts and goats and sheep. And then if you look at a radar or a scan at let's look at the bottom of the Red Sea, it's not flat. This is not flat bottom. This ain't like you walking across the beach. And it ain't flat. This is rocks and boulders and hills and all this. So it's not like a flat paved roadway that they would have been walking across. This is so it really irks me every time I see something saying they crossing the Red Sea crossing. It's the Sea of Reeds, which I already explained how there is a naturally occurring event when the wind comes off of there's a certain wind time frame that the wind comes off the Mediterranean and it blows 6 feet of water and makes it where you can walk on the bottom of it. And that is more relatively flat. It's muddy as hell, but it's relatively flat. And it's nowhere near 21 miles. What's eating Glenroy like what's eating Gilbert? He'll be all right, y'all. He just stumbled on the wrong page. That's all. He just stumbled on the wrong page. He thought that he was going to a Christian page, or some other Bible believing page. Or even if you come here, I don't mind if you have constructive things. Like, I'm not saying you got to go away, Glenroy. If you have constructive thought process, something significant, like if you, well, you know, archaeologically this or that or whatever, that's readily acceptable. But your rhetoric, eh, you provide no stimulant. So we just continue. Yeah, but I had there was my Masonic group one time was dude was like everybody got to belong to a church. And I told him, I said, first of all, that's against masonry, so you can shut that nonsense down. And then I was like, I'm not going to the church. I used to piss off the Grand because he was like, it's St. John's Day. Everybody got to go to church. I say, it's St. John's Day. I am not going to your goddamn church. I'm not going to any church. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it'll be a very muddy journey. And can you imagine trying to go over the rocks and cliff and all that stuff at the bottom of the Red Sea? Man, please. That's not going to work at all. And the Kemetic people don't record this incident happening at all. This fire tornado from the sky blocking them, that would have been recorded. If I was in that military, or look at that big ass fire tornado and look at that big cloud that the Hebrew people follow. I'm recording that. Somebody would have recorded that. And the Egyptians were recording all kinds of stuff, even things that they tried to hide. Like they tried to hide Hatshepsut and they did a very good job of hiding her for a long time. But the more we dig, the more we uncover, we found out that Hatshepsut reigned in Egypt, built a whole bunch of stuff. You can't hide it. Everything is out there. So if all of this was going on all over Egypt, people would have been talking about it. Imagine all this stuff going up in the district of Ramesses, according to where it was all happening. You mean down in Karnak? Ain't nobody sitting down like, why in the hell are all the rivers and all the water turned to blood? Why all my cattle done died? All these flies, all these frogs. They wouldn't have no clue what's going on in the district of Ramses initially. You know, they'd just be down in Karnak like, what the Ra, what's going on now? You know, they've been praying to their deities. Like, what the hell? They've been focused on that. But all these things would have been happening and they wouldn't have known any of it, of why and who. And then, so you mean, and even if a decree went out and said that, hey, don't say nothing about this, somebody still would have wrote it down on something in Egypt, but nothing else is written. This story is only in this book. So those are some of the reasons why it's unacceptable. You got to give me some proof. Yeah, you got to give me some proof. The reason why we know ancient cultures existed because we found proof of their existence. The ones that we don't have proof of, we say that they're a myth. Until dude found the city of Troy, ain't nobody believes Troy existed. I mean, there was a myth. It was a myth. But y'all don't go picking on old Glenroy. He'll be all right. He'll be all right. But a lot of these stories, they're trying to, they found some walls around in Jericho, some stones that looked like a wall had fell in Jericho. So they try to say, well, that proves the wall of Jericho. No, it doesn't. You know how many times these city walls in the Levant have been destroyed because the Babylonians came through, the Akkadians came through, the Assyrians came through, the Greeks came through, the Romans came through. All these different people groups came through and pretty much consistently inhabited the same city, changed the names of a lot of those cities, depending upon who's in charge of it. But a bunch of people came through and destroyed, built, destroyed, built, destroyed. It's a natural thing. Look around in the city that you're in. There are buildings in the city that you're in that don't exist anymore from when you was a child, from when you was a teenager, when you was in your 20s. I go through Atlanta, I'm like, damn, I remember when that used to be this, and I remember when that used to be that. But then that building was destroyed, and then they put up a new building. Or they used parts of the old building and restructure the building into something else. If we do it today, why wouldn't they have done it back then? So when they claimed this, they were trying to claim Jericho. It's like, you're not claiming, you can claim this is the ancient city of Jericho, but you cannot validate that they walked around it 7 times and used some kind of sonic weapon to destroy the wall, except for the one that had a red sash on it. It's not, that doesn't prove that. You have to have something else to prove that. Show me the sonic weapon, then you got something. If you can take the technologies to which they had and the access they had back then, and boom, you got something. And here's the thing. This is something that's messed up about Christianity. And there's a guy, I'm gonna do a video that's gonna be something about this. He was trying to make this long ass statement, but the first thing he said is that you got to believe and then study and all that. Okay, so first I got to already have a predetermined landing point and belief. That belief means that I don't have any facts or don't need any facts to back it up, right? If they wanted us to believe this book, there are a couple of different groups who claim that they have the Ark of the Covenant, right? Let us all see it. Put it out there. If the Ethiopians are claiming that they got the Ark of the Covenant, and you want people to believe and to say that this is the right way to go, whip that thing out. Remember, they used to parade in Exodus, Leviticus, they paraded around the Ark of the Covenant. Judges, Numbers, they parade the Ark of the Covenant around so that people believe it. It's right there. If you got it, show us. But you want me to just believe it, but you don't want to show it. Usually that means that you ain't got it. You don't have it. It's inside this church, and only one man can go inside of it and deal with it. Nobody else can. And then 80 people jumped in front of a militia and allowed that militia to mow them down to try to stop them from going into that Ethiopian little church and taking the Ark of the Covenant. They got mowed down, but then I couldn't find any stories or anything that said whether or not they went and took it or not. Right? That's the only weird part about that story, is that like they just want to report on the 80 people jumping in front and getting killed, but they don't say anything about whether or not they invaded the church. They did say they took the church, but they didn't say if they invaded. Now, it kind of throws me off a little bit too, because if I was a militia and I came and I took this so-called Ark of the Covenant church, I'm about to bring it out and show y'all. Man, I'm about to say, man, I went in there. Ain't nothing in that, dog. What was that when we was growing up? It was a big deal. It was somebody's vault. You had Geraldo. Showing my age again. Whose vault was Geraldo going in? And it was a big build-up for it too, boy. I mean, it was huge. Everybody was in there. Geraldo was gonna open it was some gangster vault that he was gonna open. We was all ready. And get there, open the damn vault, ain't shit in there. It was nothing. Got us all worked up for nothing. That's what'll happen if they say we're gonna open up and this gonna go in there with the cameras and we're gonna see in the holiest of holies the Ark of the Covenant. And you're gonna get in there and it won't be anything in there. And then even if they, first of all, we have to be able to date the metals and the wood and everything that's on it to make sure that it's situated for the time frame that they say they built it. Then it's got to demonstrate some power. Al Capone, thank you, Alan. Then it'll have to demonstrate the power that it claimed that it had. We gonna march around with it, and then we gonna blow some trumpets, blow the chauffeur or whatever that horn is called, the ram's horn, and I want to see some walls crumble. I want to see some people go up, touching, and lightning comes out and kills them. Because there's a guy who touches it, gets near it, touches, and lightning comes out and kills him. It got to work too. You just can't have a replica or an old box. It got to work. And it would be so simple. Why is this deity always showing up back then? In these stories, they are always showing up. But these stories are always written by people who are hundreds of years or thousands of years later. It's never written by the people at the time frame that this stuff happens. So that doesn't make any sense, right? It don't make any sense. When the United States dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it was recorded by the people who were present. It was recorded by the people who dropped it. It was recorded by naval ships off the coast. You got images of it happening when it happened as proof that it did happen. You got photos of the aftermath, videos of the aftermath, right immediately when it happened. But yet when they walked around Jericho and knocked down all the walls and all this kind of stuff, you have absolutely no historical accounts of those things happening. Jesus is supposed to have been up on a cross and an earthquake happened. The stones rolled over. Nobody wrote about an earthquake. There's no other writings about an earthquake happening at that time frame in Jerusalem. Where's the Romans recording the earthquake? Where's the other Jewish Hebrew people recording the earthquake? Where are the Syrians? Everybody else who was living in that area, none of them are reporting an earthquake happening at that time frame. Where is it? Where is the other reports of other astrologers seeing a star in the east, and then that star moves southeast to go to and hover over Bethlehem? Where's the other reports of that? If it's a star, that shit's high in the sky. A whole bunch of people should have saw that, not just these magi. A bunch of people should have saw it. Where are the reports on it? There aren't any. You know why? Because they made it up just for that book. That's why there are no reports on it. And we're not going to find any. And then they just make shit up. Do you know that you can go to Rome and see, is it Rome where that's at? I can't remember if it's Rome or Israel, but I think it's Rome, where they're supposedly saying that they have the three wise men. First of all, it never said three. It never said three. There were three gifts given, and that's why they say three wise men. But there was never three. They also say three because the three is just like the three kings that you see in the sky every goddamn all night on the northern hemisphere. Only in the northern hemisphere. You see it every night, which is now the belt of Orion. It used to be the belt of Asar, is what the Hermetic called it. So that's why they say three. Now, originally they was only saying three because they gave three gifts. But then as the internet came out, they had to start saying, oh, there's three because three kings and the stars up there. But we should be able to see the stars. The other people would have saw this star in the east. Where is it? And then they should have been able to see the star move from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, which is southeast. And it's more south than it is east. So you're not going to follow a star out of Jerusalem down to Bethlehem if it's just a regular star sitting in the sky. And then it hovered over the house. It hovered over the house. So what do y'all think that sounds like? Star in it. You're in Jerusalem. You talk to Herod. We've seen the prophecy. A child will be born who will become the king. We see his star. And then they follow the star to Bethlehem. And it hovers over the house. What does that sound like? I'm going to give y'all a minute. Papa Soul said UFO. Honey Hogan says spaceships and chariots, chariots of the gods. That's what it sounds like. Sounds like, you ever seen a helicopter flying at night with a spotlight? Today was a good day. That would sound like to me. Sound like the LAPD with a spotlight. Now, mind you, it took some years for them to reveal it. But you can go now to Egypt, and they've uncovered those glyphs, and one of those glyphs looks like a helicopter. Because, a jet can't hover. Well, we got the Harrier now, but the Harrier jet really doesn't hover. It only hovers for takeoff and landing. It's not going to hover. So an Osprey, this ain't nothing but a helicopter plane. I hate that plane too. But that's how the Egyptians said that they seen helicopters. And that's what that sound like. Sound like a helicopter or a spaceship. Could be the Greys. And now it's hovering. Realize Bethlehem at that time frame, you talking a town is like 300 people or less. It could be less than that. You can have 300, you can have 50 people. So a town doesn't have to be a bunch of people. But Bethlehem was pretty well known. So, and it was close enough to Jerusalem. I mean, I think it took us 45 minutes on the bus. So it could have been, it could have been 300, 500, 600 people. Nobody else reported this. Nobody else saw this light of this thing hovering above Joseph's parents' house. Because that's where they were. They went to Joseph's parents' house. They weren't at they weren't at a hotel. I feel like things we have today have always been like it happened before. We think we're more advanced, but we're not. Nah, yeah, I think that the pre-Younger Dry civilization had just as much stuff as we do. About the earthquake, I do not know about reports, but archaeologists have shown that is evidence of an earthquake in the area. There is evidence from the salt deposits in the Dead Sea that there was an earthquake, a smaller one in the area about 60 years after the recorded one, about 30 to 32 BCE. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that they recorded that there was an earthquake, a smaller one in the area about 60 years after they recorded one. Who recorded the one in 30 to 32 BCE? And dating an earthquake, I don't know. You know what? I don't know how you would date an earthquake, so I'm not even gonna try. I'm not even gonna. How do you date an earthquake? And are you saying that an earthquake happened in 30 to 32 BCE? Yet Matthew is the only one that records an earthquake now. Mark, Luke, and John does not record an earthquake. Now I understand people can be watching the same event and pinpoint certain things. But certain things everybody talks about. Like when we had an earthquake here in Atlanta, people talk about it differently, but the thing that is consistent is that earthquake happened. So I think that if there was an earthquake, I don't know, that Mark, Luke, and John would have also recorded an earthquake. I ain't never heard. Let's see. Let's check Dr. Google for a second. So they're saying that there was an earthquake, most likely April 3rd, 33 AD, that startled city residents and caused moderate damage, especially to the west side of the Temple Mount. All right, we're talking about 33 AD, which 33 AD still does not match the timeline. But let's just let that one have it. But 33, and well, our count, our time is off because zero wasn't accounted for in. And 31 AD, you had an earthquake within 26 to 36 AD window when Pontius Pilate was procurator of Judea, and an earthquake and the crucifixion historically constrained. So there's a time difference here between 26 and 36 AD. An earthquake happened in the area. Oh, these jokers trying to say an earthquake hit at 4:17 a.m. Okay, I need somebody who's not a biblical website talking about this, not the biblical websites. I need some non-biased earthquake people. Yeah, see, the headlines will say, "Oh, it happened in 33 AD," but when you start reading it, they say, between 26 and 36 AD." Wait a minute. Okay, Pontius Pilate was. I was. Wait a minute. I might be reading that wrong. Now, John says he died on the 15th day of Nisan, whereas Mark, Luke, and then Luke says he died on the 14th day of Nisan. When they look at these Jewish calendar and the astronomical calendar, Friday, the 3rd of 33. So, in terms of the earthquake data alone, Williams and his team acknowledged that the seismic activity associated with the crucifixion could refer to an earthquake that occurred sometime before or after the crucifixion and was in effect borrowed by the author of the Gospel of Matthew, and the local earthquake between 26 and 36 AD that was sufficiently energetic to deform the sediment of the Ingeb, but did not energetic enough to produce a and still extant produce a still extant and extra biblical historical record. If the last possibility is true, this would mean that the report of an earthquake in the Gospel of Matthew is a type of allegory, they write. So, earthquake happening and around that time, but nah, it's not precise. See, just by saying like an earthquake happened in and around some years of that time doesn't necessarily mean that the account is valid, but was borrowed by somebody who wrote about it 60 years later. I think Mark was written supposedly around 60 years later. I think Matthew was supposedly written somewhere around 90 years, 75, 70 to 90 years later. So the writer of Matthew could remember an earthquake happening or could know of an earthquake happening in and around that time frame. And then as the person in charge of that study, Williams, was saying, added it to the story. But it doesn't prove the story. Sandra says, show me the information of how he know. How he know what? I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure. I was reading a more non-biased account of this earthquake thing, so I'm not sure what was going on when you typed that in. Sandra Slane. I like that. My name is Sandra Slane. I had this thing about how names connect. Like, y'all leave Gilroy alone, Rashid. I mean, Glenroy. Why do I want to call him Gilroy? What's a Gilroy? Oh, Ocean's 11. No, that's It's Ocean's 13. When they gave old boy a Gilroy to make old girl kind of swoon for him. That's why Gilroy keeps coming in my head. Y'all know I love my movies. But as far as that earthquake thing, okay, it's not enough to say that it actually happened. And then it still remains that why would only one person report this earthquake? But when we look at how this Bible is constructed, we know that the Mark, Matthew, Luke, John, those names were added to anonymous writings. So whoever wrote Matthew whoever wrote Mark in around 60, 65 didn't say anything about an earthquake. He may not have known because he wasn't there and just wrote the story. The guy Matthew might have known that there was an earthquake somewhere during that timeline and needed a vehicle to move the stone. So he improvised an earthquake. Luke, John, don't say anything about an earthquake. And as we went over, I think it was about a week or so ago when we talked about the differences between the four the crucifixion stories, and how all of them were different. And they're all different because you got different people telling this story, not at the time of witnessing the story, but hearsay, 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 hearsay. Now I'm gonna write down the story. You know how much a story. That's why these stories are different. You know, oh, there's two angels. It was one angel. The angel supposedly in the Matthew version, I think the earthquake happens, the stone rolls. Mary Magdalene and somebody else saw the angel descending down, and it was one angel. In the other three stories, the angels was already there when either Mary Magdalene and the other women in Shalom, or Mary Magdalene and Mary Mother Jane and Joanna, or it's always different people showing up. Mary Magdalene is the only consistency. And then you got Peter running up there, and then you got Peter and another dude running up there, and the young dude outruns Peter. Right? There's two angels on the inside, one angel on the outside, two angels on the inside, one but sitting at the head and the foot of the slab. The Shroud of Turin is supposedly in one, but not in the other one. It's too many differences. But an earthquake, that helps y'all case. That would help the case a little bit. But I would question why the rest of them didn't write about it. Why the rest of them didn't write about it? Why the Romans didn't record this earthquake? Now that I would also wonder that the Romans didn't, and the reason why the Romans would have recorded this earthquake is because if it did damage, it's supposed to have been a 6-pointer, I believe is what I read. If it's a 6-pointer and it damaged some of the buildings, now you gotta put forth tax dollars to fix this the city. And the Romans were very good at counting the money and counting the cost for building construction. So where are those writings? Where are those accounts of this earthquake happening and damaging these buildings? And nobody wrote about it. The Romans didn't write about it. Pontius Pilate didn't say, "Hey, it destroyed some shit. I need some more money to rebuild it, to fix it." Unless this story is based off of Tacitus coming into Jerusalem under fanfare, date palms and everything, and him purposely tearing down the temple and utilizing the stonework for the temple for other Roman construction. That was recorded by the Romans. I sent you a plausible timeline that deals with the differences. If you address them, I missed it. You sent me a plausible timeline. How did you send it, Charles? I mean, unless you're talking about the earthquake thing up here. Because I see that there was a earthquake. They are saying that there was an ancient earthquake that happened around that time frame that you said, 30 to 32 BCE. So I can give you that. But for that earthquake they're estimating that earthquake caused damage. But where's the records of the damage that the earthquake caused? There's no records at their time frame of this earthquake. So although geologists today are saying that earthquake happened during that time frame, in order for them, there should be more evidence of it. There should be evidence of reconstruction. There should be historical evidence of those people at that time who wrote about it. Now if it happened in and around the Dead Sea instead of happening in Jerusalem, then there were no buildings or things like that in and around the Dead Sea at that time frame. So, and even today, there's no buildings around the Dead Sea other than like, oh, they built this shower that you can go into to wash off the salt and all that sort of thing. There's like more modern day construction around the Dead Sea. But there are no ancient constructions around the Dead Sea because the Dead Sea would have been relatively useless to those people back then, right? So there wouldn't be a need to spend any money if it happened at the Dead Sea There's nothing to reconstruct. There's no taxpayer dollars going out. So no. But if it happened in and around Jerusalem, a 6-pointer or 8-pointer in and around Jerusalem, you're going to have construction costs for rebuilding stuff. But there's none of that. You do get construction costs for taking down every stone from the temple that Titus did in 70 AD, 70 well BCE, CE, 70 CE when Titus tore down the temple and reused that stonework to build other things. Titus recorded that. Well, Josephus technically recorded for Titus, but that was recorded. But during Pontius Pilate's reign, none of that was recorded. There was no construction for damage to the city. What is this one? Yeah, because this site is saying an 8.2 earthquake hit Jerusalem in 33 AD. Mm-hmm. And see, like this person makes a good point. The August 24th, 79 CE Naples earthquake was well documented and coincides with the eruption of Vesuvius. And there is no additional references. In 33 AD, Byzantia and Palestine and the city of Nasai were destroyed by an earthquake, but it has to happen in Jerusalem, not in Byzantia or somewhere else. So there's evidence of the Romans recording earthquakes close enough to that time frame in other areas, but they didn't record it. And they recorded the destruction, but they didn't record it there. Uh-oh. What did I miss? They hired Donald Trump's real estate team to repair and paid him under the table. I could see Mackie crazy. I think the earthquake happened when he died on the cross. Supposedly, the earthquake supposedly happened after he died on the cross. That's only Matthew records that. No other gospel records that. And there's no Roman recording of an earthquake either. Ooh, send it to me again, but send it to me like in the instant messenger, Charles. Because if it's in the comments, I might miss it because some of these get a lot of comments. I just need more information than, oh, we estimate that there's an earthquake that happened at this time frame. Okay, other people would have recorded that earthquake. Right, and Luke, I think Luke, Matthew, and Mark talk about the sky being darkened. Some say that they think it was a dust storm that darkened the sky, um, but they also try to indicate as if it was a solar eclipse. There was no solar eclipse at that time frame, so that's why they're trying to say that it could have been a dust storm that was going on that clouded so that you couldn't see. None of the biblical writers wrote about the destruction of Jerusalem, even though, but historians wrote about the historians who lived during that day wrote about the destruction of Jerusalem by Titus. They that's how we know it was destroyed. That's one of the ways we know they were destroyed because you got multiple people writing about how the Romans destroyed Jerusalem. You know, knocked down some walls, tore down the temple to rebuild some stuff, and how Titus came in. We got multiples of that, and then there's somewhat evidence of it being destroyed, of just rocks and stuff all in the area. There is talk of an earthquake, Luke 21. We're gonna check that one because I could have swore when I read each one of them, when you read each one of them, only one talked about an earthquake. Luke 21. Oh, but this ain't got nothing to do with the crucifixion though, Michael. This looks like some end time talk conversation. So what you're talking about is the destruction of the end time is the destruction of the temple being a sign of the end times. This is way before the crucifixion. Well, I ain't gonna say way before, but this is before the crucifixion as far as the earthquake. And what he's talking about in here, he said, and then they said to him, nations will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, as plural, famines, pestilence in various places, and fearful events, the great signs from heaven. Uh, but before all this, they will seize you and persecute you. They will hand you over to the synagogues and put you in prisons, and you'll be brought before the kings and governors, and all on the account of my name. Uh, and so you will bear testimony of me. This is end time prophecy, not crucifixion prophecy, as far as the Luke one is concerned. You said Mark 13. Mark 13 and 8. Jesus says, and watch out that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, claiming I am he, and will deceive many. When you hear the wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places and famines, and there are the beginnings of birth pains. Again, that's end time prophecy. That's not at the crucifixion. We're talking about an earthquake at the crucifixion. Crucifixion. Oh, hey Charles, I appreciate. I see you got to go. I appreciate you being here, my guy. See, that's how you do it, Glenroy. Like I'm sure that me and Uh, Me and Charles don't agree on some things, but Charles came in here respectfully, putting his points out there, not calling people names, not saying anything, this, that, and the third. Good job, appreciate it, brother. If you get a chance, send me that. Send me what you was talking about. I appreciate. I take time to look at everything. Yep, ain't nobody coming back. Should have been during slavery. Should have been during Jim Crow. Right. There are two statements of earthquakes in Mark and Luke. Yeah, there are statements of earthquake, and that's fine. There's statements of earthquake in Revelations, but it got to be. We were talking about at the crucifixion, and here's the thing: if I'm gonna give an end of world scenario, yeah, I'm gonna predict earthquakes and tsunamis. We're gonna have earthquakes because we know more about science than they knew at that time frame, right? I'm gonna add tsunamis. I'm gonna have the famines. I'm gonna have all that. I'm gonna have that the people are gonna rise up against governments because that's what people have done throughout the ages. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna have some earthquakes. I'm gonna have some torrential downpours in areas. I'm gonna have the stars. They thought that meteorites were stars falling out of the sky. Think about that. In Revelation, they say the stars will fall out of the sky. Like a third of the stars are gonna fall out of the sky and land well. You know how big a star is to them? Stars and little bitty things in there. They know how big stars were. They're gonna fall out of the sky. Shit, one star come close to Earth, and we done. You don't need stars. You don't need a third of the stars falling out of the sky. Are we gonna lose our view of those stars? Maybe they're gonna and they was that, and that's why I can see a person saying, "Oh, no, they mean that we just won't be able to see them at night, and they're gonna look like they fell out of the sky." And that's what they meant by them falling out of the sky. You just can't see it no more. But when they wrote this, they was thinking about how meteorites fall out the sky. I lost y'all for a second on YouTube. But so I was saying that when we went to Wilmington this weekend, and on 7476, you can literally see all the stars. Like, I mean, it's a ton. It's beautiful. You know, you would think you'd be able to see it that well on the beach, but you can't. It's too much light pollution. But we saw shooting stars, and it's sad that we still call them shooting stars today because it's not a star. But they thought back then that would be a shooting, that was a star falling to Earth, and it's not. It's a meteorite. So when a third of the stars fall out of the sky, but if I was predicting end time, yeah, I'm like, yo, it's gonna be meteorites gonna bombard the Earth and cause all kind of stuff. Y'all can hear me now, right? Can y'all hear me now on YouTube? Did you hear the whole part about the shooting stars? Rashid, leave that man alone. No one has seen Jesus since he got up. He sure hadn't. Because he never got up. Or if you went with the gospel according to Mary Magdalene, he never died. The frankincense, the myrrh that they supposedly took to him when they took him off the cross, healed his wounds And then him and Mary Magdalene went on and lived their life. She got pregnant, and then she escaped to um, most likely Egypt, even though the Europeans want her to escape, to want her to have escaped to France to start the Merovingian line, so that people like Charlemagne and all these people can claim that they are part of the bloodline of Jesus, and that's how they were able to, claim their, ancestry and their kingship. There's actually some theories out there that the whole Middle Ages, Dark Ages, that Middle Age time frame of Charlemagne and all that is a made up story. I saw it, I ain't researched it, but somebody trying to say that we shouldn't be in 2023. It should still be like 16 something or 15 something, that there's made up history in order to give um, antiquity to some of the European kingdoms that came during the Middle Ages. Well, after the Dark Ages, and that Charlemagne never existed, that he's mythological. Has anybody ever heard that before? That would be interesting. I might do some research on that just to find out. I think that'd be an interesting conversation, because it would if that is true, it would show how easily it is to manipulate history, um, because it is easy to manipulate history if it's coming from whatever your highest form of government. You can manipulate the hell out of history. Okay, so you did hear the stuff about the stars. All right, cool. I think everybody should take some time, go out, find an area of wherever you live, go in the middle of nowhere where there's no lights. No lights. Because like on 74, 76, between 85, I mean 90, 95 and Wilmington, there's some areas with no lights. That's your first time hearing that, Rashid? Yeah. Yeah, I saw it one time, but I was doing something else. I was studying something else, so I didn't take the time. I told myself I was gonna come back to it because I thought that was interesting. Do you think he escaped the cross? The Quran says that, and apparently they got that info from the Gnostics. There is sufficient information even within the canonized Bible, but okay. So the only thing in the I ain't gonna say, because I can't say sufficient. So when you read the story of when you're reading the resurrection story, a thing that I never thought about it beforehand, but then the fact that they brought myrrh with them to anoint the body, as they say, but they brought myrrh. Myrrh is used for can be used for healing, and back then was definitely used for healing people, healing wounds. So why are you bringing a medicine to what is already a dead body? That can lead you in the thought process, as the Quran and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene both, and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is a Gnostic gospel. So the Quran could have gotten it from the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and I think one or two of the other. I think the Secret Readings of Peter or Secret Readings of James also talks about how he didn't die, and the Gospel of Judas talks about how he didn't die as well. I know the Gospel of Judas does. I'm quite positive that one does too, but I haven't read it in a long time. I can see how the Arabs could have taken that and made it fit that he didn't die on the cross. And the fact they brought him myrrh. So it's plausible. And then when you look at the accounts of Josephus, none of the Jesuses died. In the four Jesuses in Josephus' writings, none of them died. Even the ones that were punished didn't die. And it wasn't uncommon for somebody to be put up on a cross for a few days, and then the person is taken down and the person gets to live. That's why not everybody was nailed through the hand. Well, it was hardly ever nailed them through the hand anyway. If they're gonna nail you, they nail you through the wrist, right? And then they bandage it up so that you don't bleed out. Your family was there to keep the crows and the other birds from messing with you, and to keep giving you water and sustenance so that you can live. And because you had a sentence, you're gonna be up there for 3 days, you're gonna be up there for 4 days, or however long, and then they let you down. And the nailing of the ankles, sometimes they nail the ankles, but you have this little standing stump piece of wood that you can stand on to keep your weight up so that you didn't, your lungs, because if you just hanging, it's going to be hard to breathe. But then if you got a little standing stone, you can prop yourself up. They would also, family members also had like these sticks, like crutches, that they would also use to hold you up if you're going to be up there for a while, because they knew you was getting back down. So crucifixion didn't always mean death. So there is a possibility that if there was a Jesus character, that he did not die while he was up there. Plus, if you're gonna die, you're gonna rise again. It's not even a sacrifice. Not even a sacrifice. Oh, you and Rashid talking. You can't see him in your dreams, I do it all the time. I live deep in the country. You'll be amazed what you see in the skies at night. Yeah, you got to be like away from the city. Listen, I like going up in North Georgia, up in the mountains, and see it because it's even less air pollution as well as light pollution. Been trying to find info on the Four Jesus. Haven't been able to find anything on Google. Do you know? Do you have a website I can read into? And most likely, your story has been legendized. So go and, you know what? Let me do it myself. If you like lectures, if you go to YouTube, well, I ain't got to go to YouTube. I can do it on Google. I should be able to do this on Google. Because I can't remember the name, but me and Dr. Google got a special relationship. Uh, let me put that, and then let me add. I don't remember what school. Okay, yes. Is that my? Is this the one? Mm, there was. Let me. The first thing that got me started. I want to find what first got me started with that one. Well, it didn't first get me started, but it was easy on. I saw it again. There is a college professor at Yale University. Um, he teaches religious studies. So he's not teaching at a seminary. I always got a problem with. I don't like seminary teachers have already decided what it is. So if you um, go to YouTube, who am I talking to on that one? Oh, Matata. Go to YouTube, type in Josephus and Yale, like the University, Yale University. You got, I know there's you're gonna see this bald headed white guy with some glasses on. He does some very good lectures on first century Judaism, the historical Jesus. So check him out. There's another guy when you scroll down, Dr. Henry Abramson. He has a good lecture on Josephus. But Josephus is in the Antiquity of the Jews. If you read the Antiquity of the Jews, that's where you can get it. But if you want to like shortcut it and not have to read all of it and everything that was going on, those Yale lectures are good. But Antiquity of the Jews, and it's like, I forgot how many volumes. It might be like 7 volumes. But that little bald head dude in Yale, he gives very good lectures. His lectures are very good. Tells you where he gets the information from. Tells you where to go find it. Um, and he's not putting a bias or a spin on it. It's like this is just information. And he also breaks down Josephus' life so that you can understand Josephus' point of view when he was writing these things. Oh yeah, Dr. Google is my friend. Me and Dr. Google. Thank you, Baffa. Welcome to the stream. Appreciate you. Make sure you subscribe and hit that bell icon. People worshiping Jesus, meanwhile, while trying to find his hermetic teacher who taught him all his alchemy. If so, I'm debatable on whether or not Jesus, the Jesus character, ever went to Egypt in the first place. Um, and this is the problem with these gospels, right? You got one gospel that says that Joseph, the angel came and told Joseph, hey, y'all need to leave and go hide in Egypt, right? And then supposedly he went and hid in Egypt and all this kind of stuff. Then you got another gospel that says that they stayed in Bethlehem for the 8-day period of being unclean, then went to the temple, gave Yeshua his name, so had him dedicated, and then they went back to Nazareth. Then it says they went back to Nazareth. It doesn't say anything about Egypt. They went back to Nazareth. Then in the non-canonical, the infancy gospel of Thomas, it talks about him being in Nazareth and being a spoiled little brat ass kid. But in the canon, if they went to Egypt, it talks about them making their pilgrimage, them making their annual pilgrimage back to Jerusalem when he was like 12. And that whole I'm about my father's business stuff he was teaching in the temple. If he was in Egypt, then what are you doing in the temple when he's 12? If they're supposed to be hiding. And then it don't make sense because the death of Herod doesn't correlate with the birth of Jesus. There's a gap. Right. We don't know who wrote these books. Yeah, and we just have copies of what people wrote, and then we don't even have them. They're not even complete. You're looking at it now. You're looking at those lectures. Yeah, and what was that? Let me go back to this part. So some estimate that Herod died um, around 4 BCE. Herod the Great. Then Herod Philip reigned for 36 years, right? But there's a problem with this whole scenario. If he died in 4 BCE, right? Now they originally wanted him to die in 1 BCE in order to fit the biblical story. What does his death matter? So, Michael, multitasking over there. What was the purpose of Joseph and Mary going to Bethlehem? Right? What was the purpose? The purpose was that they were going to Bethlehem for a census. Why was there a census being taken at that time frame? Well, the census was being taken because Herod died, and then a census had to be taken at his death in order for the Romans to collect the right amount of taxes at the time frame after he died to settle his estate. That's why Pilate came down there. Pilate doesn't come down there to 26 BCE. I mean CE. But I think it might have been Quirinus who came in down and actually did the census. So my bad. So so Pilate ain't got nothing to do with it. Not Pilate. Yeah, Pilate ain't got nothing to do with that. Quirinus is the guy I think who came to do the census to settle Herod's estate before Herod's son Philip took over. That census wasn't done till 4 BCE. This is one reason why they say that the wise men didn't come, that Jesus might have been a little toddler. This is the way this argument is going on, where Jesus might have been a little toddler for these wise men. They didn't come see a baby Jesus, a birth that had just been born, and that the shepherds seeing them at birth, the magi seeing him when he was like a little kid, because the census wasn't done until around 4 BCE, when Herod's estate was being figured out. So you tell me. When was he born? When did he die? Was he born in 4 BCE? So that it would coincide with the fact that the Joseph and Mary coming to Bethlehem for the census. And according to the story, she had the baby when they had to go to Bethlehem for the census. Herod didn't die to 4 BCE. So he had to have come in 4 BCE. And if he didn't come to 4 BCE and he wasn't born till 4 BCE, then that would mean that Jesus didn't die until 37 BCE. Which, if we go back to the earthquake, it don't fit. The earthquake won't fit. So we can't have that. If not throwing stones at my man who brought that part up, but this earthquake information that he was telling me is new information for me. But even with that new information, the information that this book is already talking about, it really just demonstrates that there are some things that don't fit in that scenario. Because he would have been born, if you go with the census and Herod's actual death as recorded by the Romans, 4 BCE, 37 BCE is when the earthquake should have happened, not 33 BCE. So that time frame don't fit. And then going to Egypt, if he was born in 4 BCE when Herod had already died, then there's no reason for them to go to Egypt, which is why one of the gospels don't go back to Egypt. He goes back to Nazareth. But the other gospel saying that Herod was alive. So he had been born in 0 BCE or 1 BCE, which then he can go to Egypt for 4 years and come back and then be 12 years old and go into the temple. That would work out, except for the fact that Herod just didn't die in 1 BCE. He died in 4 BCE. So there again, it just still won't work out. No matter how we slice and dice these things, there are inaccuracies, and it doesn't match up with the more acceptable known history. So, what would you recommend for spirituality, Coach? I've been seeing your videos of doing the I ams. I've been doing the 42 ideas of Mayat. What other spiritual practices would you recommend? Let me read both your statements first. I used to beg God, but praying to the spiritual world has had some peace of mind. When I was Christian, I don't know what to do since I deconstructed. Oh, y'all gonna make me. I've been thinking about actually doing a spiritual journey class, like a whole seminars for like weeks at a time. I just got to get my free time because I have to do it early in the morning, which will mess up anybody on the West Coast, or I got to do it really late at night, which messes up my time frame with Angelina. And y'all important to me, but uh, so if I decide to do that class, that it's not so much that I would pinpoint and push anyone towards any one thing, but we would definitely go over hermeticism. We would definitely go over alchemy. We would definitely go over the Tao, uh, meditating with sound bowls. Because the thing about it is, I would want people to find their own path that clicks with them as far as their spirituality. Not saying, oh, go become a person who's Ifa and get with your ancestors and all these things. But we would go through the Akashic record so that you can understand that all your ancestors are within your DNA, which is 25% of who you are. 75% is based on your environment, how you grew up, what you're growing up around, what's in front of you right now, the things and decisions that you've made that has created the life that you have right now. So before I do that class, which it won't be free, let me go ahead and say it right now, because time is valuable, information is valuable as well. Um, but it'll be cheap. It'll be cheap. Uh, so you've been doing Mayat, you've been doing the I ams, which is good. Uh, you must have seen one of my videos when I had my I am wall up. So definitely, I would start adding. Do you know how to meditate? Have you meditated before? I would definitely add meditating and sound bowls because getting your frequency in order. But you need to understand the hermetics as you get your frequencies in order and going through. I like the chakra process. Not saying that chakra is the thing, but I like the process of chakra because it gets you in tune with yourself. So yeah, so opening your chakras with the understanding of the hermetics and alchemy and meditation with your IAMs. IAMs are great. You should do that. Matter of fact, I think we were delaying our move to Puerto Rico for business reasons. So I'm probably that's the only reason I haven't put an IAM wall up because I was like, we gonna leave it. But I'm gonna go ahead and put my IAM wall back up in the meditation room. So keep doing those things. Get you some sound bowls and the process of opening your chakras, getting rid of all your fear, your guilt, your shame, your lack of the ability to outright love or anything that's hindering your ability to love. Um, find trueness of self, so self discovery, so that you can open your third eye to be able to connect everything and see everything, and then open your crown chakra, and then your own spiritual path will reveal itself. Like it'll reveal itself that's just for you. You already studied the Bible and you're working on the Quran. And I read other books like Jasher. Is that the book of Jasher or Jasper? Jasper. I ain't got my glasses on. And those are some of the processes I went through, Michael, when I was leaving Christianity. I went ahead and I read the Quran, and I read as many non-canonical books. We didn't have the internet when I was doing this, so y'all are blessed. Y'all are blessed with that internet. But yeah, so let's do that. And you know what? Ah, damn, I don't want to make any promises about it. I mean, I was talking to Angelina about doing classes and seminars, and I really got to figure out a great opportunity to do it without taking time away from us, because I already work 12, 14 hours a day. So if I did do it, it would have to be a Saturday morning, Saturday or Sunday morning. But those are times I don't want to take that time away from Angelina, because I would have to take some of that time. I'm not taking time away from her because she doesn't get as much time as she deserves right now because of my work schedule. I don't know, man. I'm gonna have to figure it out. I have to figure it out. Okay. Because finding your spiritual path as part of it, not just your romantic relationships, but in order to open your heart chakra, you have to be able to quantify and handle all your relationships and control your emotions as far as how they function. And I'm not in doing that. I can't. I got to my managing my relationship is vital to that understanding. Let's see here. Um, so yeah, let's see what else we got. I'm stuck on my yellow chakra, struggling with that one. Oh, so your solar plexus, that gut, that's your power chakra. So your power chakra is blocked by shame, and shame when you're looking at it from this perspective is things that you've done that you've made a mistake. So it's things you've done, but you don't view them. Let me rephrase that. Things that you've done, but you are not viewing them as mistakes. You're not viewing them as mistakes that you have learned from, overcome, and release the feelings, the emotions from it. Still holding yourself accountable for them. Like for a long time, I still carried the shame of getting a divorce from my kid's mother, which took me out of the household on a day to day basis with my kids. And it took me a minute to realize um, that I can be and am a great father to my children, although I am not in their house every day, not in as much of their lives as you would be if you lived with them. So I was feeling shameful about that. But through talking to my kids and then committing to the action of making sure I gave them as much as I possibly could of myself, which is one of the reasons why these videos started, that helped me to realize that I don't need, there's no reason to carry that shame. Some people, shame and guilt are very hard to distinguish sometimes. And sometimes you're doing both, which will block your sacral chakra and which is which we can block your sacral chakra as well, which is your orange one. So and they're going to work hand in hand. A lot of the things that you do to break one of those is breaking both of them. So you have to realize that certain things just happen, certain things were mistakes, but whether it's something that just happened or something that was a mistake, you have to look and see how you've learned from, and then you progressed so that you're actually find that silver lining to make it better. And it's each individual thing is going, could be and will be, could be different in how you handle them and view them. So whatever you feel shame about that you're creating for yourself, the real big difference is guilt happens when somebody on the outside makes you feel bad about something that you did or you was involved in, and then you carry that guilt. Shame is how you're making yourself feel about that situation. It can be this, it could be the same situation, but how you're making yourself feel. Because I had outside people trying to make me feel guilty about what happened in that instance, as far as my kids, and then I had my own feelings. So I had to break both at the same time by realizing and acting, putting forth the actions. This is why the hermetics are important, because I have to recognize the pole of what I'm dealing with here, and then increase my vibration through taking cause and effect. But first, get my mind right and taking cause and effect actions to give me the effect that I desire, which is to be a great father to my kids so that they grow up and become well rounded, great adults in whichever life pathways they choose. And that has been accomplished, and it's still being accomplished because they only, what, 27, 24, and 23. I mean, 22. So they're still kids. Um, they're still children for me. They haven't really hit that full adult thing going yet. And you really don't until you're in your 30s and 40s when you start really becoming an adult. And that helped me to release that and let that go. And once I let it go, I became even better of a father to my children. Right. Um, like me and my son had it out some years ago, because but I had to realize the reason why he didn't want to talk to me as much is because every time I talked to him, it was life lesson, life lesson, life lesson, life lesson. I'm giving you all the life lessons, boy. You got to get the life lessons, life lessons. But when I talked to my daughters, I wasn't so hardcore about life lessons, life lessons. And then he finally just said that every time you talk to me, all we talk about is life lessons. And sometimes I just want to talk, just to talk. I don't want to talk about life lessons. I don't talk about anything else. So I had to do so for some years. We just talk, regular talk. So now we can just have regular talk. Um, you know, so but I'm always sneaking in some life lessons. Now that he's 22 and off in the Air Force, we sneaking them in. But that helped me to release how I felt about me not being in the house with him all the time. But it's other things, and then whatever the situations are, the more and more of those that you get past, that you identify and then work through, your solar plex chakra opens up, and you will literally become a more powerful person. You will, and then the other part about opening your power chakra is, and it's funny because I just heard somebody say this on this TV show that I was watching, cultivating your instincts. How many times have you, a lot of your shameful things come because your instincts told you to turn left, but you went right. And then the world, everything just went to hell in a handbasket because you didn't listen to your instincts. Your instincts told you not to date this person, but you didn't listen. It told you not to take this job, but you didn't listen. And, so on and so forth. Cultivating that cultivating that ability to trust your instincts becomes very vital as well in opening that, because even once that chakra is open from the things that block it of shame, then cultivating it to expand its presence within you so that you are getting more in the flow of the universe and the flow of the way. This is why the Tao becomes part of these lessons, because the Tao is all about you getting into the energetic flow of the universe, moving as the universal energies move, not moving how you're trying to force things to move. And when we don't cultivate our instincts, we often find ourselves forcing things. You know, um, some people, when I close down the popcorn shop and then reopen somewhere else and then close it down and reopen somewhere else and close, for them it's like failure, 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 failure. You ain't a good business person. You ain't this. You ain't that. You ain't the third. But for me, it's just the flow of energy. All right, I was here in this plaza. It was a Publix in there. The Publix is gone. Plus some investment stuff went a little crazy, and the relationship and the marriage ended. Didn't have much of a choice, but I'm gonna go over and open this other place because instinctively I knew not to listen to this person, but I didn't listen to those instincts, and I listened to them, and I waited so long that my only choice was to go to a place that I would never open up a shop in. But I opened it up anyway because I didn't have much choice at the time. But prior to that, the energy was, I don't care if this man claims to be a millionaire, he gonna invest, he gonna do all this stuff. He ain't do shit. We wind up being less of an investor than I expected. I should have followed my gut, my instincts, and went ahead and moved when I knew I should have moved, and then I would have moved into a space that would have worked just as well as the current one was working. That created a whole 6 years of spinning around in circles, going from jacked up location to jacked up location because I didn't have the funds and my credit started looking kind of a little shite. So there you go. But if I had listened to my instincts in the beginning, I would have avoided 6-7 years of horror. So then you have to cultivate your instincts because that's where it's coming from. That's like where you're most connected to the universe and the energetic flow of the universe, I should say. And that all comes a part of alchemy, of putting it through the fire and grow, putting it through the fire, purify, grow, put it through the fire, purify, grow. So, yeah. Shit, that's worth the price of admission right there, if I arrogantly say so myself. Uh, so, yeah, I mean, take that part, roll with it, rock with it. That will help you to open up that chakra. Now, make sure you've already opened up your, since we're going by color here, make sure you go ahead and open up your red and your orange, right? So, whatever fear you have, get past work through your fears, work through your guilt, because that orange is not going to open fully if the red and the orange are not open. So if your sacral and if your foundation, your root chakra and your sacral chakra are not open, that solar plex chakra, that power chakra, it's not going to open either. You have to do it from. I hear one guy telling me you work from the top down. No, you can't. You can't do that. You can never open the crown chakra if you're living in fear, shame, guilt, all that sort of thing. You have to start with the root chakra and work your way up. That's like you're trying to build a house from the roof down to the foundation. You have to build from the foundation up to the roof. So, but it is 1:42, and I need to find out where this joker at because we're not playing this game today. And I also got a few other things I need to take care of. So we're going to end today's transmission. How did y'all feel about the podcast today? Good? Enjoyed yourselves? It was crap? What are your thoughts? What other subject matters would you guys like to discuss? I know we always start on one thing, and after 12 o'clock we go all over the place. So if you got any suggestion for future subject matters, please type them in. TikTok. Once this live is over, I can't see anything from this one. You can't hear me, but it's green. I got the green light. So I just take the microphone out. But we're gonna end. But I do want to know what other subject matters you may be interested in. Um, for other podcasts. Tomorrow's Tuesday, so tomorrow we're in Leviticus. What's Wrong with the Bible? The live stream for What's Wrong with the Bible. We are at, where we at? So we did 10 and 11, Leviticus 10 and 11 last week. So it's 12 and 13. Leviticus 12 and 13 tomorrow. Wednesday, have no idea. Thursday, Gospel of Thomas, part 4. Friday, have no idea. But as always, we come up with something. I appreciate that, Mata. And we will. Oh, excuse me. Look, y'all really help the channel when y'all comment, when y'all like, when y'all subscribe, when you hit that bell icon. Especially for the next 20-something days, commenting is a great thing. I appreciate Errol for giving the financial donation. You are always supporting me in that format, brother, and I appreciate you tremendously. One day I plan on being able to do this full time. So I do appreciate the financial gifts on, what is that, YouTube, the financial gifts on through stars, on Facebook, and the gifts on TikTok. So thank you guys, appreciate it. And we will convene tomorrow around between 10 and 10:30. And don't worry about them people who come here to discredit me, man. I don't worry about them. Oftentimes, some of them are smart enough to give me some information that actually makes for good videos later on. But most of them aren't. Most of them just going, you're an idiot, you're stupid, shut your mouth, blah, blah, blah. Instead of actually, well, such and such, read this and that. But, yeah. So it's cool. I'm fine with it. But y'all have a great day. I'm out for real this time. It's been 3 hours and 11 minutes, 12 minutes almost. So, as always, remember you got to free yourself to be yourself because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Yes, indeed, tomorrow.